So to Shavua Tov, today's daf in Masechet Bava Kamma is daf Samach Hey 65. Moving really right along. Last week was a tough week, I would say. Very, very challenging and exciting and interesting Gemara about a very complicated concept of Kefel and Daled Vehe, right? So the Torah says that if a person steals from another person, they have to pay back what they stole. If they are caught, they pay kefel. I mean, this is all, some of this we learned last week is not so obvious. They pay double. And if it happens to be a shor or a seh, and they sell it or slaughter it, then they pay 4 times the seh and 5 times the cow, right? And we discussed last week that that involves not just a robber, a person who goes and steals, but also a person who was initially given an object to watch. He's a shomer. And then at the end of his period of shmirah said, I don't have it anymore. It was stolen from me, and is lying. Effectively has stolen the object, right? So that's called to'en ta'anat ganav, where the person made a shvua and said, I didn't steal it from you, and therefore I'm putter from giving it back. It got stolen by someone else. Turns out that person's lying. They effectively stole, and they too have to pay kefel. And we discussed all this a lot last week. So today we get off that topic briefly. It's a lot easier daf today. I'll give you that warning. On daf samachay, we are the 4th line from the top, and we refer back to a comment that was made yesterday. Kufa, going back to a comment that was made. Amar Rav. Rav said, from the fact there's the pasuk, we were dashing all the words of the pasuk last couple of days, and one of the psukim in Mishpatim says the following. It says, I'm going to read it. Im hi matzeti matzei biyado hagneva. If you find the object that was stolen in the hands of the one who supposedly said it was stolen from him, misharad chamor atzeh. Chayim, if it's alive, shnayim mishalim, you pay 2. So we asked yesterday, what does alive have to do with anything? And so Rav said, and that's the quote now, the limud, the teaching from the word chayim is keren ke'ein sheganav, that you pay the principal as if it was quote unquote alive, meaning as if it was the same status as when you stole it. So if it went down in value, let's say we're going to discuss this all today, then you still have to pay the original value. If I stole a shor that was worth $1,000 and it went down to $500, then I don't pay $500. I pay the 1,000 like I stole. That's the keren. That's the principle. But the extra payments of tashlumi kefel or tashlumi arba v'chamisha, the extra for kefel, the extra for 4 or 5, then you pay those kishat hamada b'din. You pay those at the time that you come to court. So it doesn't depend on when you stole it. It depends on when you're caught and when not necessarily caught, but when the court assesses the value.
So the reverse would also be true if it increased in value?
We're going to see. It's a good question, but right now you can assume that the inverse is true too. The answer is no, but let's assume it for now so that it's more fun. Says
Yes,
my time of Rav. What's the reason for Rav's statement? Because Amar Kra, the pasuk says Gneva b'chayim. It says you stole it, and it says the word chayim next to it alive, which is a strange juxtaposition. Amai Amar Achmana chayim b'gneva. Why did it say the word chayim when it's talking about something that you stole? It's telling you, this is now the statement, Achyet lekeren kein sheganav. Make the keren alive as if when you stole it, which implies, as we're going to start learning, that you have to increase it if it goes down in value. What happens if it goes up in value? So that's a good question, but we'll see. Amar Rav Sheshet. Said Rav Sheshet, when he heard the statement of Rav, he was unimpressed, to put it nicely. Amina, you know what I think? Kinayim v'shachav Rav Amar lahashmaita. When Rav Nayim v'shachav means he was dozing off and sleeping. Rav did not have his morning coffee before he said this statement. This is a common put down in the Gemara. So put it down, if you want to use it. So Rav didn't seem to have thought this one very clearly when he said it. Why? Titani, because there's a beferish braita which seems to contradict what Rav said. The braita addresses this point, which was probably a very common point, right? You stole an animal, these things go up and down in value. And so the question is, of course, how do you assess that damage? So the braita says, Titania, chusha, let's say you steal a very weak animal, right? A very spindly animal I go to someone for whatever reason, I steal his cow, I picked the wrong one. and this one is all bones. And his shmena, I make it fat, right? The robber, I feed it, I take it to the vet, I give it the shots, I do all the work. And then you get caught. So what do you pay? Says the Braita, Mishalim tashlumei kefil v'tashlumei arba v'chamisha ke'ein sheganav. You pay the double and the 4 or 5 like it was worth when you stole it. So if you stole a $500 cow and you increased its value to $1,000, you don't pay double the $1,000, which is what it was worth when you were caught. You pay double the $500. So that seems to go against Rav, right? Rav just said that you only pay that the tashlume, sorry, it doesn't go against Rav. The kefel, it does not go against Rav, but this implies that you pay, it is against Rav, right? Rav said that you go with the kefel and the 4 or 5, kishat hamada bedin, at the time that it was discovered, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So Amri says the Gemara, Rav would say to you, well, that's different in that case. There you pay the original value because the extra value of the shar was investment that you put into it. The robber can state to the original owner, anapatimna, I fattened it up, at chocolate, and you're going to take credit and get value for that. So there's no reason why that's your investment. It's my investment as the thief. I only should have to pay you based on what your cow was worth when I stole it. Okay, Tashma, let's look at the opposite case in the Braita. What if the animal that I stole, a robber, was shmena, was a nice, healthy, fat animal, and through my actions, Rashi says actions might here mean that I actually used it for work, right? So I didn't change the oil in the cow, right? And I used it too much and it got weaker, or I hit it, I abused it by hitting it with the stick and made it a less valuable animal. So I actively reduced the value of the animal, and then I'm caught. Says the Braita, you pay at the time that it was stolen when it was more valuable. So again, this is not what Rav said, right? Rav said that you pay according to the time that you're caught. So answers the Gemara, well, the same answer. They would say to the Ganav, what do you mean? You're not going to pay double what it's worth now, which is much less, right? You basically made it go down in value. So mali katla kula, mali katla panga, right? If and Rashi likes this example. Rashi says, look, if you shecht an animal, right, and then you're caught, obviously the animal's not worth very much; it's dead, right? But we don't say to you, oh, you don't pay double the original value, you pay the current value. You clearly pay what it was worth before you killed it. So if you're using it up and decreasing its value, that's another way of killing it slowly, so to speak. And so certainly in that case, if you actively cause it to go down in value, you don't get credit or extra, reduced payments because you reduced its value. So you'd have to pay the original higher values. You know what? Rav's not referring to that case. Ki Kamma Rav. Where was Rav talking about when there's market value? Yukra vizula hudakama. When it goes up and down, when the price of, as we know, obviously about inflation, but obviously there's deflation with certain products. Let's say the value of cows or sheep or whatever you stole goes up or down in the marketplace through no action of the robber or anyone else. And so you stole a watch. It turns out that watches become much more rare, and now this watch is worth double. So that's where Rav said that, look, the principal you pay based on the time that you stole it. And that's what the Torah tells you from the word chayim, based on the original moment. The double and the 5 and 4 and 5 is a knas that we assign on you, and you pay based on what it's worth when we assign the knas. And so if you bought a diamond ring, you stole a diamond ring that's worth $1,000 and the market changes and it goes up to 2,000, you would pay 1,000 of the principal and double 2,000 for the kefa, etc. Says, well, let's see if that's true. Hechidami, what's the specific case? Now, let's say my case I just gave you. You stole this diamond ring. It's worth a zuz, right? Worth $100. Ulabisov shavya arba zuz, and it goes up to 4 zuz, to $400. So the natural market went up tremendously, went up 4 times, right? So then Rav would say, Karen Kain Shiganav, right? That you pay the principal based on when it was that you stole it, which is the 1 zuz. And the 4 or 5, well, you don't pay 4 or 5 in a ring, but you pay kefel, you'd pay based on the current value. So if that's true, that seems to contradict a very popular saying, Lema liga de Rav adarabba. It seems that Rav is arguing with Rabbah. Now, of course, the formulation of that statement makes no sense because Rav, as you know, was generations before and very senior in terms of seniority, or in terms of generations, to Rabbah. So it's not like Rav can't argue with Rabbah, right? You can say that Rav won't argue with a Mishnah or something, but certainly Rav can argue with Rabbah. But clearly, why the reason we're bringing this is we're going to learn in Bava Kamma, in Bava Metzia, sorry, this statement of Rabbah, which some people say is Rava, but either way, this statement of Rabbah was a very accepted and well-known and sort of universal principle. So it's not that Rav can't argue with it, but like it would be very far-fetched for Rav to argue with something that everyone seems to have accepted. And what is the statement of Rabbah? Damar Rabbah. Rabbah went through a very common scenario, which happened, it probably happens still today. But Haiman de Gazel Chavita de Chamra Mechavre. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, right? You stole a Chavita de Chamra Mechavre. You stole a barrel, Chavita is a barrel, of Chamra of wine from your friend, right? I always steal from your friends here. So a man went into someone else's house and took out a beautiful jug of wine. Okay. And Meikara Shavya Zuzah. Now, this barrel of wine, initially, if you went to buy it, would be worth a zuz. Ula Besof, but after whatever period of time, the market changed, and now it's Shavya Arba Zuzi. It went up in value, and it's worth 4 zuz. We'll see why later we keep quoting 1 and 4, but it went up to 4 zuz. So then what happened was, says Rabbah, if Tavra Oshatya, let's say then, after the price of wine went up, so the same barrel that I stole that was worth 1 is now worth 4, and then it broke. I broke it, sorry, Tavra means I broke it, or I drank it, so the wine is no longer here, then Mishalim Arba. You got to pay the market value of what it was when you broke it or drank it. So, okay, that's one comment. It doesn't go according to Rav, but we'll see why in a second. Itbar mimela, but if the barrel breaks on its own, mishalem zuza, then you only pay 1. And this is a crazy statement. The Gemara Bava Metzia goes through this in detail, and it's sort of the crux, I would say, of today's whole daf, which is that according to the way the Gemara explains this in Bava Metzia, which Rashi quotes here, if I'm going to keep using I, even though I try not to steal, but if I steal a barrel of wine, right, and I'm Shimon, let's say, and I steal a barrel of wine from Ruvain, and the wine is sitting now in Shimon's basement, right, hiding out, and the market rate changes and the value of wine goes up. The way we view that is that the wine is still Ruvain's wine, because the fact that Shimon stole the bottle from Ruvain doesn't take ownership away from Ruvain. He stole it. And so because of that, when the market changed and the value of wine went up, it went up in the possession of Ruvain, of the original owner. It happens to be in the basement in Shimon because he stole it. But the wine went up in the possession of Ruvain. It goes up to 4 zuz, and then Shimon drinks it or breaks it. And basically at that time, Shimon has committed the crime of ruining it, and he has to pay based on that time. So that's if Shimon actively destroys it. However, if Shimon doesn't actively destroy it and it breaks on its own, not through any action of Shimon, right? The bottle was old and just sort of had a lifespan and it broke. Then since Shimon didn't do any new actions, right? You have to say that the time that Shimon did something wrong was when he actually stole it from Ruvain a month ago. But when he stole it from Ruvain a month ago, it was only worth 1. And therefore you're only paying based on the action of that time. So and so you have this funny situation where you basically are kona it, the Shimon is the robber, but only for certain purposes, not for other purposes. Shimon's responsible for what happens to it. You can't say, it's not my fault that it broke, even though it was in my basement. It's Ruvain's wine in my basement. The Shimon is responsible for that, but only responsible based on the time that he stole it, not the current value. Now that's what Rabbah says in Bava Metzia. Everybody seems to agree with that. It contradicts Rav, right? Because Rav said that if it goes up and down in value, then you pay based on the time that you stole it, which would imply that if it went from 1 to 4 in my basement, you only pay 1. Rabbah here says you pay 4.
Does
So
that
how do you
refer to Kanas or to the
the principle?
or to the Karen?
The Karen. This is all referring to the Karen. Yeah, to the principle. So answers the Gemara, Kika Amar Rav, it's true. Rav would agree with Rabbah that if it went down in value, went up in value, then and then it depends on whether you're active or not. If you actively broke it, then you basically are mechayev and you have to pay the higher value. But if you didn't actively break it and it broke on its own, then you're responsible because you stole it, but you're only responsible for the original time. That Rav would agree with. When did Rav say that it all goes after the original time? Kika Amar Rav. Rav was saying, Kigon de Meikar Shavya Arba Ulubesof Shavya Zuza. It's talking about where it went down in value. So you stole a barrel of wines with 4 zuz. You didn't do anything to make it less, but over time the market went down. It was flooded with wine, and now it's only worth 1 zuz. And then you drink it, right? Or you break it. So then Karen, the principal, Ke'en Shaganav, you have to pay the higher value, the 4, basically. Tashlume kefel, tashlume arba v'chamisha kishat hamada b'din. But kefel, or 4 or 5, and of course you don't pay 4 or 5 on wine because it's not an animal. But if it was an animal that you stole, and it went down through its own natural market, not through actions of your own, then you pay the lower price, right? So the Karen, the principal, you have to pay the original price as when you stole it. The extra that you paid, the double or the 4 or 5, you only pay based on the current value. And since it went down in value through regular market fluctuations, you pay the lower amount. And that's what Rav was saying, which is consistent with Rabbah, right? So Rabbah was basically saying that as long as it's passive, you go after the original act, which was when you stole it. If you did something again, then you can reevaluate how much you have to pay. So that is the statement of Rav, which agrees with Rabbah.
But Rabbah wasn't mentioning the Kanas here, or he was only talking about Karen.
Correct. Rabbah was not talking about the kefil. Correct. Rabbah was referring just to this case, which is why, again, we're bringing in Rabbah from Bava Metzia to this question on Rav and Bava Kamma, but Rabbah was referring to you stole a barrel, it went up in value, which is pretty common probably, right? And then the question of what you pay depends on how actively you were involved in destroying it. If you did a new act to destroy it, you got to pay the higher value. If you didn't, you don't. And that is true about the principal only. And Rav would agree with that because it went up in value. Now, 4 lines from the bottom, last word on the line. Tani Rabbi Chanina l'siu de Rav. Rabbi Chanina said, I found a Braita which supports this statement of Rav. What does the Braita say? Now we're quoting a Braita now, 3 lines from the bottom. Balabait, right? You have a balabait, which is always the word we use for the shomer, for the watchman, right? So I keep using I a lot, but I hope we get the gist, right? The Ruvain walks over with a beautiful gold watch, and he gives it to Shimon to watch for him, like the watch. And Shimon says, Ta'an tanat ganav pikadon. Shimon says, I don't have your watch anymore. It was stolen. And he's a shomer chinam, so he's patur for stealing. So Reuven, of course, says to him, well, I want you to swear that my $10,000 watch was stolen, right? And so Shimon swears, and he says, I swear that it was stolen, that I did not have it anymore. It was taken from me. And then Nishbai swears, the Hodeh, and then he says, the next day he wakes up and he says, I feel really guilty. I made the whole thing up. I still have your watch. I wanted to steal it. I apologize, and he gives it back to him, right? But witnesses also come and report that Shimon stole the watch. So if Shimon admitted that he still had it before the witnesses came, remember, a person who admits doesn't pay kefil, right? So then Mishalim Keren, then he only pays back the principal. But as you recall in the Torah, there's something called Asham Gzelot. And Asham Gzelot is a Kraban Asham that you bring when you claim that something was stolen, but you lied about it. You actually stole it. Okay, and there you have to pay a karban, an animal, and you pay the principal, and the Torah says you add a 5th, you add a chamish, right? So then the person who lied has to pay Mishan Keren, the principal, the chomesh, and the 5th, which is always a quarter in the Torah, the asham, and you bring a karban. That's if you admitted that you stole it before the Edim came. But im mishabo Edim hodeh. Let's say the Edim came first, and they said, this guy's a big liar. He said your watch was stolen. We saw him wearing it out last night. And
did he make a shavua when he says he doesn't have it?
Yeah, you have to make a shvua. So the Torah talks about where you make a shvua. It turns out you were lying, right? Then you have to bring the karban. So it's called, right, it's an asham that you bring with the shvua.
Right. So because if he didn't make the shavua, then he would not bring the asham.
Correct. Or the 5th. Correct. The asham or the 5th. And to be clear, the asham is part of the kapara. It helps forgive you, right? It's a good thing almost to bring an asham. But yeah, if you didn't make the shvua, then you don't bring the asham, and the asham is clearly connected to the false shvua, which is
so if you lied about it and later admitted, you only owe the Karen?
No. Well, yeah, if you lied about it and admitted, you only owe the Karen. Correct.
Okay.
If you didn't make the shvua and you denied that it was stolen, and the next day before they brought you to court to make the shvua, and you said, you know what, I don't want to make the shvua, I lied, I stole it myself, then you just pay the keren. If you
So
made a
there's no
shvua,
penalty for lying.
sorry?
There's no penalty for lying.
There's no monetary penalty. You
Yes.
leave the rest to God. But if you're caught, right? So witnesses come, then you pay kefil. What if you swore that you didn't steal it, and then witnesses come? So you made the shvua, you have to pay the fifth, but then witnesses came, which makes you pay kefil. So what happens then? Says the Braita, important case, im yishabo edim hodeh. You admitted after the witnesses came, meaning the witnesses came, so your admission didn't mean anything. Then says the Braita, mishalim tashlume kefel, you pay double, and you pay an asham. You have to bring the karban because you swore falsely, but you don't pay a fifth. Why don't you pay a fifth? Because chumsho ole lo b'kfelo. Your chomesh is your kefel. Your kefel that you pay is your chomesh. Now, different Rabbi Yaakov. Now, we're going to discuss this in detail in Amud Bet, but Rashi points out for those who are maybe not as good at math as some others, kefel means double. Chomesh means a fifth. Those things usually don't equal each other, right? A fifth in the Torah, if you recall, is always a quarter, 25%. A kefel always is 100%. So how could your kefel be your chomesh if they're totally different values? So what the Gemara is going to conclude, and I'm sure you're already 5 steps ahead in your heads, is that sometimes the value of the kefel can change based on whether the animal goes up or down in value. So if the animal, say, went down in value, and you're paying kefil of a lower value, your kefil might equal the chomesh, right? So there's a case that such a thing is possible. Now, we're going to discuss that, but that's what we're going to try to conclude from the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov. Turn the page. That's the first part of the Braita. The Chachamim say that's ridiculous. You don't pay kefil and chomesh, that's the same thing, because the Torah says, Vishalim oto, birosho, you pay the principal, and you add a chamishito yosef alav, right? We're quoting only 2 words of what I just said. The rosho, the chamishito, the principal and the fifth. Mamona mishtalim barosh. If you're paying back only the principal, then mosif chomesh. When you're a robber and you got to pay back the primary, that's where you add a fifth. But if you got to pay back kefil, then there's no chomesh to add. Mamon she'ein mishtalim barosh, ein mosif chomesh. If the money is not being paid back at principal level, meaning because you stole it and you were caught, then you pay kefil, then you don't add a chomesh. So the Chachamim don't disagree about the amount you pay. They're just saying you don't call it a chomesh. You're just paying kefil. And the chomesh is not required. That's the Chachamim. But they make it sound like you still bring a karban, right? And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, the third opinion, not only don't you bring a chomesh, but in chomesh, ve'asham mishtalim b'makom sheyesh kefil. You don't pay the chomesh, the fifth, and you don't pay the asham. Because the asham is only brought when you're paying the fifth, and since you don't pay the fifth, you don't bring the asham. Now, later, when everyone's a little more calm, we're going to discuss the machloket, the Chachamim, and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, right? About the asham or no asham. But let's go back to the first opinion of Rabbi Natan, right? I got it, Rabbi Yaakov, sorry, I got the wrong name. The first opinion of Rabbi Yaakov is, sure, you pay a chomesh, but the chomesh is the kefil. Now, it says the Gemara, Ketani Miha, it said in the Braita, we're 5 lines from the top, chomsho ole lo bikfelo, that your chomesh is your kefil, divrei Rabbi Yaakov. Hechidami, what does that mean, your chomesh is your kefil? Ilema, now obviously it changed in value, right? If you stole a $5 cow, or $500 cow, and then you denied you stole it, and well, forget about a cow. Let's use the watch, right? You stole a $5,000 watch, and then you denied it was stolen from you when you were watching it. You denied that you had it, and you said it was stolen. You swore, and then you were caught to be lying, right? If your kefil is $5,000, your chomesh is $1,250. It's 25%. Clearly, those are not the same thing. So it must have changed in value. How did it change in value? Hechidami. So what's the case, says the Gemara? Let's say it was like my original case. It was initially worth 4 zuz, and you stole it, right? You denied that you had it. You said it was stolen from you, and it turned out you were lying. But it didn't change value, and it's still worth 4 zuz. Then, what do you mean chomshe ololo b'kfela? What do you mean that the chomesh counts as the kefel? Kfela arba'a, the double of 4 is 4, and chomsho is 1, right? Because 20 again, chomesh means, although it says a fifth, it means 25%. So 25% is 1. So it can't be that same. It's not the same thing. Now Rashi points out Amud Aleph. Well, maybe it just means you pay the kefel, and subsumed within the kefel is the chomesh, right? You pay 4 and say one of that 4 is the chomesh.
Well,
Rashi
that
says
will
that can't be
almost always be the case.
I'm sorry?
That will almost always be the case, that the chomesh will be within the kefal, except
Correct,
for the rare
correct.
cases. So that would include the chomesh.
Chomesh. Correct. So Rashi says it can't mean that, because then you're playing games, right? Because you can't say it's not a chomesh if it's a kefel, right? Meaning it has to be the same value for it to be counted as one thing. And so if it's just subsumed within it, that's not going to satisfy everyone. It's a big debate. Tosfos here discusses this as well, why we can't just say that. But we're not satisfied with that. It has to be the same value. Elalav, what must the case be? The meikar shavya arba, right? You stole this watch that's worth $4,000. It goes down in value. And ubesof shavya zuza. It's only worth 1,000. So now, remember, the principal you always have to pay based on what it was when you stole it. So you're going to pay back $4,000 for the watch. But remember, Rav said that the kefel and the daled vehe, you go after what it's worth now, if it went down on its own, if it went down through the market, right? So this seems to support Rav, because now it's only worth 1 zuz, right? So you pay double 1 zuz, which is 1 zuz. The chomesh is based on the keren, on the principal, which was 4 zuz, and so the chomesh of 4 zuz is 1 zuz also. And so in this case, you pay only 1 time the kefel, which is also the chomesh. So the kfela zuza, because it went down in value and it's only a zuz, the kefel is only a zuz, the chumsha zuza, and the chomesh is also a zuz because it goes after the original. Alma, what you see from here, it's a proof to Rav that keren kain sheganav. The principle, you go after what it was when you stole it, which was the 4. And tashlumi kefel, tashlumi arba v'chamisha keshat hamada bedin, that you pay based on now, the time that you finish the case. And that was only worth 1. So this Braita, this very interesting case in the Braita, seems to support Rav. Amar Rava said, Rava, I just want to be clear with you that that's not the only way you could read it. I have another way to read it, which is also far-fetched, but your case is a little far-fetched too. Hacha b'mayaskina, sorry, la'olam, it's always a case. The meikar shavya arba v'hashanami shavya arba. Forget about this whole foreign, changing value. It could be the watch didn't change value. You gave me a watch to watch for you. That's worth 4. I denied that I had it. I said it was stolen. So I stole it from you. I swore. And then the next day it turned out I was lying. And it's still worth 4. It doesn't change in value. So why, your kashya, you're going to ask, so what do you mean the chomesh and the kefil is the same thing? Kfela arba, the kefil is 4, and the chomesh is only 1. The chomesh is zuzah. Hacha b'mayaskina, you know what the case might be where this actually works? Kigon shenishpa v'chazar v'nishpa arba pa'amim. Right? What happened here was the shomer, balabayit, as we call the shomer, lied about it 4 times, meaning he swore and said, I swear that it was stolen from me. And then they were like, really? I swear again. I swear, and each time you swear is an avera, you're over something, and you have to bring an asham, a karban, and you have to pay a chomesh for each time that you swore. It's interesting. You don't have to pay the keren, but you have to pay a chomesh for each time that you swore falsely. And so you did it 4 times. And therefore, your chomesh is 1 zuz each time, but 4 times 1 is 4. And your kefel is 4. And that's where there's a case where the kefel and the chomesh are equivalent. So that's the case, right? So
who receives the kefel? The court or the
kefel
owner?
and the chomesh, it's a very good question. We're going to get into this in 1 second, so I'm going to explain it. The kefel and the chomesh both go to the person it was stolen from. The asham, of course, the animal goes to God, right? So that's an interesting duality here in what you pay back, and it's going to become very relevant in 1 minute. So
it's interesting that if even the court makes them, or has them swear 4 times, and then the Bava wins all that penalty.
Correct. It is interesting that you're saying the penalty goes to the person you stole from, not to God, you're saying, or to the Beit Din,
or to the state or the court. Yeah.
Right. It's true. But that is the case. So nishba v'chazar v'nishba arba pa'amim, and then he admit hodeh haTorah omer, and this is actually a drasha that we make, chamishitav, which is plural, which means sometimes you can pay more than 1/5. How can you pay more than 1/5? If you swear multiple times. HaTorah ribta chamishot harbe b'keren achat. You can pay more than 1/5 on the same principle. Anyways, that is how we now explain Rabbi Yaakov. It doesn't prove Rav, but it certainly indicates, like him, that there are times where a fifth can equal 100%. And the most likely case would be where something went down in value. And so 100% of the lower value is a fifth of the original, or a quarter of the original value. Now, Amar Mar, let's go back to the second part of the Brighton, the third
So this is deliberately contrived to aid the owner of the object. I mean, the court could say, we're going to make you swear 8 times, or you can make you swear 2 times. I mean,
Right, so that's a good point, but we generally don't assume the one time is all you have to swear, but the person might want to swear again, right? No, it's not, the court will not make you swear again. It's if the person's like, you're attacking their character, or you're bringing proofs or more proofs, and then he keeps swearing and swearing. But it's not, the court will not make you swear more than once. Once you've sworn, that's all you have to do for the court case. But if you do voluntarily swear, then you have to pay extra. Says the Gemara, Amar Mar. The Chachamim said, and this is now we're quoting the pasuk, Birosho v'chamishito, that since it says Birosho, which means the head or the principal, Mamona mishtalim Birosh, things that you have to pay the principal only Mosif Chomish. That's where you had a fifth. But Mamon she'em mishtalim Birosh, like this case where you stole it and you were found out, and so you pay Kefel, then ein Mosif Chomish. You don't pay Chomish, aval ashamaiti, but you do bring the carbon asham because you swore, and it turned out you were swearing falsely. Ask the Gemara, why is there a difference between the Chomish and the Asham? Ma'ash the Chomish lo mishalem, because it says Dichtiv Birosho v'chamishito, but Asham nami lo mishalem Dichtiv. Remember, if you read the whole pasuk, it reads Birosho u'v'chamishito ve'et Ashamo. So the next words you conveniently stopped after the word fifth, but the next words in the pasuk are and the Asham. So the same rule should apply to the Asham. That is, only if you pay the principal, you pay the Asham. Amr Rabbanan, the Rabbanan say, one second, I read that pasuk. It says Rosho, Chamishito, Ve'et Ashamo. The extra word separates. Et Paskekra. The word et separates those things. So the Rosho, which is the principal, is connected to the fifth, but the Asham is separate. And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who argues, remember he's the third opinion in the Brighton, says, no, you don't pay the Asham either. He says, it's true the word et separates it, but the Vav brings it back together. Vi'et means and the Asham. Vi'et arvekra. Abanan will say to you, yeah, it could be. But if the Torah really wanted to tell you that they're all equivalent, just say the 3 words. Say Rosho, the principal, Chamishito, Ashamo. Why say Vi'et, right? To separate it and then bring it back together. Where am I? Rabbanan, Amr Lecha, Lo Lichter Rachmana Lo Vav V'Lo Et. Don't say the word vav or et. Clearly, the fact that there's another word there separates it. And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says to you, no. Like what James pointed out before, you have to separate the asham, because the asham is clearly a different category than the chomesh and the principal, because the chomesh and the principal go to the owner. The asham goes to God. You can't combine those things. You have to separate it. But once you've separated it, you add the vav to bring it back together. So I'll read that inside. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Amar Lecha et lo sagi de lo ktav. Right, you can't not say the word et lafsuke de mamon gavola mamon hedyot. You've got to make a separation between what you give God and what you give the owner. It's not appropriate to put it all together. But therefore, we have to separate the asham and say and the asham. The asham et ashamo. But then hilkach at the vav arvikran. The vav comes to bring it back together. So that is a machloket and just how you read the pasuk, but they both agree that you don't pay a chomesh because you're not just paying the principal. It says the Gemara, we're at the last of the narrow lines, and we are going to start a sugya which continues. So you'll see exactly from where we just picked off from Rav, but we will not finish it today. So it's going to be a little tease as well. Says Rav Eli, I want to point out something very interesting to you. And we're getting now into this question, which we just have been discussing, of if a person steals something, when is it considered the property, so to speak, of the original, of the person you stole it from? And when is it considered to be the property of the one who stole it? Meaning, is there any kind of ownership responsibilities or requirements or action that happens through the act of stealing or changing it, right? Let's say I stole a brick from someone, right? And then I put that brick into my house, right? We've discussed these cases a lot, and we're going to keep discussing them. Is it still the brick I stole from him? Did I change the brick? What if I melted it down? What if I changed it in some way? So says Rabbi Eli, a very interesting question. Let's say, I'm Rabbi Eli, ganav tle. Let's say you steal a tle. I'm going to translate tle as a lamb. I don't exactly know if that's how everyone translates it, but a young ram, a young, whatever a lamb is. Vinaseh ayil. and it sits in your shed for a year, and it becomes a ayil. An ayil is a ram, let's say. I don't know if that's how we translate. I don't actually know the English for these words, but an ayil is an older animal, right? And animals change; they get older, they get physical characteristics that are different, and it became a different animal. So the question then is, or if let's say it's an egel, let's say calf, right? V'naseh shor, and it became a bull, right? So it grew up, let's say. Then how does that change in the identity of the animal, change the status of it as being the stolen animal? Says Rabbi Loi, Nasa Shinu Biyado, that is considered to be a change in the animal, and it's no longer the animal that you stole. And Kano, the robber takes ownership over it for Kinyan, now he still has to pay back. And if he's then Tavach Umachar, he doesn't have to pay 4 or 5 times. Shalohu Toveach, Shalohu Mocher. He's selling, or slaughtering his own animal. And so basically, he stole a calf. A year passed, it became a cow, a shor, and then he slaughtered it or sold it. Says Rabbi Loi, he didn't sell the animal that he stole, right? He sold a new animal that the animal's changed into. And therefore, he still has to pay back what he stole, of course, and he has to pay kefil because he stole something, but he doesn't have to pay arbor v'chamisha because at the time that he sold it or slaughtered it, it was a different animal. So which is a fascinating concept, but it changed in his reshut. Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Loi, we're second wide line. Rabbi Chanina asked Rabbi Loi the following question: what about the Breita? This Breita says, it addresses this explicitly. It says, Ganav tle, you steal a tle is a young sheep, Vinasa ayil, and it becomes an older one, or egel v'nasa shor, you steal a calf and it becomes a cow. Mishalim tashlume kefel, says the Breita, you pay double, or tashlume arba v'chamisha ke'ein sheganav. You pay not the value now, because this calf was worth $1,000 and the shor is worth $5,000. You pay double or 4 and 5, like when you stole it. Now, that implies like when you stole it, that you don't have to pay for what it went up in value. But it also says very explicitly that you have to pay 4 or 5. According to you, Reb Eloi, you never pay 4 or 5 because it became a shor, right? If the person who stole it gets ownership of it when it changed, then amay mishalim, why do you have to pay the 4 or 5? It's shalohu toveh, shalohu mocher. You're selling or stealing or slaughtering your own animal. Amar Leisa, okay, Rabbi Lai said back to Rabbi Chanina, thank you for asking a question. We appreciate your comment. But how would you understand the Breita? If you claim that the robber does not acquire ownership of this thing, right? So again, I steal $1,000 egel, and a year later it's a $2,000 shor, and then I slaughter it. If you claim that it's still in the ownership of the person you stole it from, then why aren't you paying like it was worth when you slaughtered it, right? It went up in value, so you should pay the higher value. Elamai, shinoi lokari. What are you saying, Rabbi Chanina? That a shinoi of the name, right? Not a name, a shinoi of the body, that it became a mature animal is not enough to give the ownership of it to the robber. So if it's not, then amay mishalim kein sheganav. Why do you only pay based on what it was worth when you stole it? L'shalim ki hashta. You should pay based on what it's worth now, right? Because again, if you say that the fact that it changed over time doesn't change the ownership, then it basically, like the case we had before, it changed over time, all on the cheshbon, on the account of the original owner. So why don't you pay double or 4 and 5 based on the current value, which is much higher? So it doesn't make any sense. Amar Lei, so Rabbi Chanina said back to Rabbi Eloi, no, I think it does make sense. Ki hashta, you pay now, hainu taima d'lo mishalim. You don't pay according to its value now. Mishum da'amar lei, because the robber can always say to the original owner, look, Tura Ganvi Mimcha, Dichra Ganvi Mimcha, did I steal a shor? Did I steal an ayil? Meaning I didn't steal an animal that's worth $2,000. What I stole from you is worth less. So I basically can say, says Rabbi Chanina, to the person, look, I know that it's been in your reshut the whole time, and when I sell it or slaughter it, I am selling or slaughtering your animal. But even though it's still your animal from that perspective, what I stole from you is not the higher value animal. And so I can sort of get in the middle ground. I can pay you based on what it was worth when I stole from you, because it changed now and the change is not what I stole. But even though it changed, I still have to pay you for selling your animal because it's still called your animal. That's how Rabbi Hanina tries to square this circle. And Rabbi Eloi was not impressed. Amar le, Rabbi Eloi said to him, Rachmana nitzlan mehaidaita. May God save us from people who think like you. This is not, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Either you go according to the original, in which case you shouldn't have to pay for selling it now because it's not the original animal, or you go according to now, in which case you pay for selling it, but you should pay the current value. How in the world do you split that and say you have to pay for selling it, but you only pay the original value?
If you pay the current value, can you counter sue for feeding and taking care of the animal?
Presumably not. It's a good question, but presumably not because he didn't ask you to do it, right? It's like you go into someone else's house and give their animal food. You can't then send them a bill, right?
I thought if you did something that benefits someone, even without asking them, you can charge them for it.
So there are some cases where you can. So it depends on if it's a case where they would have asked you to do it, right? Meaning they would have paid someone to do it otherwise, then you can. So I think it gets quite nuanced. We do discuss this. I don't remember exactly where. But let me just
when
finish.
you're actually in the situation, then you just have to ask a competent Rav.
Meaning when you steal something and you want to know whether you should feed it or not.
Right, when you're actually in the situation, then you have to ask Shai.
Your Rav might tell you to give it back if you ask. But anyways, Rabbi Hanina said to Rabbi Eloi, Rabbi Eloi said to Rabbi Hanina, God help us from people thinking like you. And of course, Rabbi Hanina's response is the classic response that we all learned in second grade, which is, it's same to you. Amar le, Adarab, no. Rachman nitzlan midaita didach. Save us from people who think like you. So they had a very mature, sophisticated back and forth here, right? So either way, you can see the tension and where it's very challenging. Because on one hand, the question is, this animal grew up, right? It became a shor. It's different. So do you say now that when the robber sold that animal, he sold some other animal, and therefore he didn't sell the animal he stole, and he doesn't pay 4 or 5 times?
Well, this could suggest that the Rabbanim give a heter for someone to do actions like this. Let's say he's watching his neighbor and he knows the animal is growing up. He steals it a week before it changes effectively from a teleh to an aisle, and then this fellow gains a great deal.
So I would just say you can ask that question in many circumstances. There are many clever ways to break the rules and make money. And the many people take advantage of those, but I don't think we're ever condoning them, right? So it's true, but I mean, that's certainly stealing, just to be clear. So it's not as if we're making you any favors. But
reminds me of the ship of Theseus paradox. You heard this?
No, say it.
If you replace the parts of a ship one by one, and over time the ship has all new parts, is it the same ship?
Right. So I think there's some relation there, but ask the Gemara before we get too far into our paradoxes here. Matkifla Reb Zera says well, you guys can fight all day long about whether an animal that grows up as a shar is different, but it's definitely called something different, right? At least Nikdinu B'Shino Hashem. Forget about whether it's physically how you view an animal, as we were just heard, right? When you turn 3, when you turn 4, when you turn 5, right? You mature on that day or 50 or whatever. But at least it's called something different. You stole an aisle, right? You stole a keves. Now you call it an aisle. You stole a calf. No one calls a calf a cow, right? This is where it's not true. They do. Amar Rava, sometimes people use terminology that way. Shor ben yuma kari shor. Even though shor generally refers to a mature cow, there's some people call 1-day-old calf a shor. And an ayil ben yuma kari ayil. Even a 1-day-old ayil, or a keves, or a lamb, is called sometimes a ayil, whatever ayil is in English. How do I know that from a pasuk? Shar ben yuma kari shar d'chtiv shar kesev oez ki yivaled, when it's born. What do you mean when it's born? When it's born, it's not a shar. So clearly you can call it a shar even when it's born. And ayil ben yuma kari ayil d'chtiv, it's a fascinating pasuk proof from Yaakov. Right? Yaakov claims to Lavan, I didn't take any of your elim. We're quoting a pasuk now. Elei tzoncha lo achalti. I didn't eat your elim. What do you mean I didn't eat your elim? Right? Elim hudlo avukfasim achal. You're saying I didn't eat any old animals, but I ate the young ones? Clearly Yaakov's saying I didn't eat anything, right? El lav shmamina, ayil ben yumo kari ayil, mikol makom kashis. It's still very problematic, right? Because the question is this. Again, you stole a young animal. It grew up and became a mature animal. So one question is that change the status, right? The Braita seems to say that it doesn't change the status because if you slaughter it now or sell it, you have to pay arba v'chamisha. But says the Braita, you pay the value of the original time that you stole it. So it does change the status. So the question is, how do you square that, right? How can you say that you pay only the original value, but what you sold now is something you still recently sold? So what you sold is what you recently stole, sorry. So it answers the Gemara, Amar of Sheshet, we're 5 lines from the bottom. I'm going to read just a little bit of this. Hamani Beit Shammai. That this Tana goes according to Beit Shammai, who Beit Shammai says that even if you make a shinoi, even if you change something, it doesn't change its status in your hands. And where's that? You did change the thing. You stole a small thing. It became something different. That's considered to be a shinoi. So you only pay back the value of what you stole. But even though you made a shinoi, if you then sell it, you still have to pay the extra. Where did Beit Shammai say this? Not by stealing, but by a separate but somewhat related halacha in the Torah of etnan. If you recall, etnan is payment that you pay to a woman for sex. I think it could be a man also, but etnan zona, right? You pay for illicit, it doesn't have to be illicit, but you pay for a sexual act, and you pay with a certain object, right? They usually have money then. That object is not allowed to be used for the mizbeach. There's a specific prohibition on bringing things from that interaction to the Beit HaMikdash to put on the mizbeach. Okay, and the Torah says that several times, right? You can't bring etnan zonah mechir kelev to Hashem, right? Says the Gemara, what if? Where am I? The Hamani Beit Shammai damish shinoi b'mekomo omed. That if you change it and make a shinoi, it still stands in its original status. The lo kani, and the person who took it is not kona. The Tanya. Let's read this Braita. Maybe tomorrow we'll read some of it again, but let's do at least a few lines of it in the last minute tonight. Natan la be'etznana chitin. Let's say a man, it could be a woman too, but a man gives a woman for her etnan a bunch of wheat. Right? His payment to her is a barrel, a basket, whatever you call it, a bag of wheat. And she turns it into solet, or someone turns it into solet. She turns it into flour. So she changed the wheat into flour. Or you gave zaytim, you gave olives, astam shemen. They became oil. She made them into oil. Or anavim asta yain, or grapes, and she made them into wine. And then she goes to the mizbeach and says, I want to bring this flour as a karba mincha. I want to bring this wine as a gift. And the Kohanim say to her, where'd you get it from? And she says, well, I had to go into this relationship and I got paid, and that's what I wanted to use it for. So Tanicha da Asur, one Braita says you can't bring that on the Mizbeach. The Tanicha da Mutar, one Braita says you can bring it on the Mizbeach. The Amar of Yosef, and Rav Yosef said, Tani, I learned from Guryan de Aspurk, which is one of the strangest names we have throughout the whole Shas. Guryan like David Ben Gurion, right? From Aspurk, from this place called I don't know where that is. I'm sure Charlie would have told us. Beit Shammai Osrin, Beit Hillel Matirim. That this is a machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai says that even though the woman took the flour the grain that you gave her and grinded it up and turned it into flour, which is clearly a change, it stays in its original status as an etnan, and you can't bring it on the mizbeach. And Beit Hillel says wrong, you can. So there's clearly a case where it changed, like an egel becoming a shor, but still you go after the original time according to Beit Shammai. Tomorrow we will discuss this in somewhat more detail, but we'll stop here and pick it up tomorrow morning at 7:45 a.m. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, I will have to catch a recording because I'm committed to davening at a Shiva Minyan here in Lakewood through Wednesday.
Okay, we'll miss you, but we will try to make it as clear as we can in the recording.
Shavua Tov. Thank you, Doctor.
Have a good night, everyone.